Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. I doubt there isn't anyone listening who can say that they've suffered like Job. But let's face it, we've all suffered. Whether it is with our health, with our family and friends, with the church, with the loss of loved ones, with just the cares of this world, we've all suffered. And in the moment of suffering, we might be lifted up in ourselves to think that God owes us an answer to why we are suffering. But you want to know what? He doesn't. If we're suffering because of sin, then it is on us to repent. But if we're suffering for another purpose, we do not have to know what that purpose is, if any, in order to remain faithful. We can still be Christians no matter what life may throw at us. In the moment, that might be easier said than done, but let's not let pride get in the way to get us to think that we're owed anything. Let's remain humble and look to the scriptures to learn how other people suffered and came through to the other side. In Job 10, Job is suffering and he is letting his pride get in the way. Let's see what we can learn from that. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to the book of Job, chapter 10. We're going to be reading from verses 13 to 22. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Job chapter 10, beginning at verse 13. And these things you have hidden in your heart. I know that this was with you. If I sin, then you mark me, and will not acquit me of my iniquity. If I am wicked, woe to me. Even if I am righteous, I cannot lift up my head. I am full of disgrace. See my misery. If my head is exalted, you hunt me like a fierce lion, and again you show yourself awesome against me. You renew your witnesses against me, and increase your indignation towards me. Changes and war are ever with me. Why then have you brought me out of the womb? Oh, that I had perished and no eye had seen me. I would have been as though I had not been. I would have been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not my days few? Cease, leave me alone, that I may take a little comfort before I go to the place from which I shall not return, to the land of darkness and to the shadow of death. A land as darkness itself, as the shadow of death without any order, where even the light is like darkness. Job does not believe that he deserves an audience with God because what is man that he can ever justify himself before God? But in the unlikely event that Job was granted one through God removing the rod that Job thought God had brought against him, chapter 10 reveals to us what he would say. And the crux of what he would say is, why? Job had been an upright man. He worshipped God faithfully. He sacrificed to him and did things that he believed were pleasing in God's sight. And for much of his life, God had protected him. He had blessed him and had preserved his soul. Job had done nothing deserving of such suffering, and yet it seems that God had hidden in his heart a desire to punish him, to search for some sin in which to convict Job so that punishment could come upon him. And if Job was wicked, something that Job didn't believe he was, woe to him. But even though he believes he is righteous, he still cannot lift his head to God, for who was he to fight against a God that seemingly enjoyed watching people suffer? Seeing all the suffering that he has had to endure, why couldn't God have found it within himself to have not allowed Job to be born, says he, or to have perished in the womb before anybody could have seen him? At least then he could have been carried from the womb to the grave and not had to face this suffering. Wouldn't that have been more merciful? Wouldn't that have been better to allow Job, a man that you supposedly care for, than to suffer? In saying these things, Job's thoughts have strayed little from his foolish thoughts in chapters 3 and 7. He still views God as the cause of his suffering. He doesn't even consider that something else might be at play. Certainly Job would know the story of Adam and Eve and how the serpent deceived Eve. Certainly he should have considered it as a possibility that maybe the same being was behind his suffering. No, that seemingly never crossed his mind, for the people of that time viewed suffering as coming from God. For Job's friends, suffering was only received by those in sin, while for Job it didn't matter whether you were righteous or wicked, for both seemed to suffer at the hand of God. That's why it's dangerous speaking about things concerning God that we do not know, for we don't readily admit that we do not know something. Job did not know and so spoke foolishly. But even though many of his words didn't seem to change from earlier, some of them do, at least momentarily, and that's his view of death. He pleads with God, since he is close to death, to allow him a little peace, to remove his hand of punishment for just a little, so that he could have a little comfort and die in peace, for at least then he could enter the land of darkness, a place without order and without light, without having suffering be his final memory. Back in chapter 3, we noted that Job didn't have such a grim view of death, for he viewed it as a time of rest, while here in chapter 10, he just views it as a time of darkness, a time of disorder, and a time where not even light can penetrate. That sounds rather bleak, but it is what can happen to us when we allow our minds to focus on negative things so much that we forget what we formerly believed in. Job was suffering, make no mistake, and in his state of mind, anything probably would have seemed better than his current state. But we shouldn't give up our hope, for that will carry our faith through, and that will enable us to get through our suffering. Job will get through it, but not without great difficulty first. With Job's response to Bildad now complete, it's Job's third friend, Zophar's turn to speak. And we'll cover his speech, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Job chapter 11, verses 1 to 20, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends, so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.